So a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and nearly or even good night to everyone. Welcome back to the second to last session of this year's International Conference on Inclusive Insurance Digital Edition. That will be a very exciting session talking about the ups and downs of inclusive insurance, learning from experience. Thank you to Michael McCord for getting up very early, facilitating that session. This session probably covers more time zones than any other session, from Wisconsin, which is GMT -6, to New Zealand, which is GMT +13. So we have 19 hours of time zones covered. So thank you very much for taking your time, and I hand over the microphone to Michael.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Yeah, 19 hours of time difference between Lorenzo and I. I always knew Lorenzo was so far ahead of me. It's great to be with everyone. And yeah, this is quite a time change. I'm actually excited to do this at 4 o'clock because by the time we're over, I usually wouldn't have even awakened. So I've gotten all this productivity before I even would have gotten out of bed normally. So this is good. We have a great session here, I think. We have to think about the fact that we learn lessons as we go. And conferences like this are very important platforms for us to talk about some of those lessons. Sometimes we get a lot of the happy story and we don't hear what goes on underneath that or what gets us there, the ups and downs, the steps, the evolutions. And so really what we want to do is dig into evolution today and look at evolution of a couple of the big issues that we've been talking about throughout the conference. If you think about how new products, new processes, even entering microinsurance and moving forward go, we see that we do some things. If we're doing this right, we do some things, we learn some lessons, we make some changes, we fix it, we do some more things, we try again, and we try again until it works. And we have maybe not a better example of this kind of evolution than some of the discussions that you'll hear this morning. Today we've got 3 super speakers. We have to talk about key issues. So looking at the issue of evolution overall and taking a very step-by-step methodical approach through the evolution of a process and product that was at Pioneer Life. We have Lorenzo Chan, who I'm sure many of you know, and he's going to be here to talk with us about the evolutionary process that he's followed and some really good insights here. And I think everybody should get your pencil sharpened and get ready for some real good notes. This is really important. One of the other issues that has come up over and over again in this conference is around mobile networks and mobile insurance, mobile microinsurance, mobile insurance. And we're going to talk with Peter Gross from ICII about the evolution that microinsure and the public information of BIMA went through in terms of them being the largest of these entities doing M&O insurance, actually starting M&O insurance. And so this is a fascinating piece also to look at these issues. One of the other issues that has been big, we've heard several times talk about agriculture and index insurance related to global climate change. And so, we're very excited to have Agrotosh Mookerjee here, who is the head of Risk Shield. And he's worked in 34 different countries doing a lot of on-the-ground work. And so what you've got here are real practitioners, originators, innovators, who are going to talk about the evolutions that they've gone through in trying to make this work. And I think, all of us should be listening very carefully to these lessons. So we're here to appreciate these lessons. The caveat to all of this, we're here to appreciate the lessons from evolutions. We're not here to put anybody down for any problems that they had or any of that. What we should do is be applauding these folks for talking about problems they had, the downs. Too often, all we hear about are the ups. Now we're going to hear about the downs and the ups and how they link together. This is really critical for us if we're going to have success in this area. And so we've all benefited from these lessons, and many of us, I mean, certainly I have benefited from the lessons from all of these speakers. So I understand that there's a slide that tells us all the rules. So maybe Asia, if you could show us that. I think probably most of you have seen this half a dozen times already, so I'm not going to get too carried away. Everybody's muted, so you can say whatever you want, but we won't hear it. And questions, do use the Q&A feature. I know a lot of times there's the Q&A feature and there's the other comments feature, and they get mixed up. But use the Q&A feature, it's much easier to monitor that. For legal reasons, we need to warn you yet again that you're being recorded, and that whatever you say can and will be used against you, and will be available for any future employer to look at. So keep in mind what you might have, what you might have to say. And then if you've got technical problems, you can contact the MIN, and I presume that they'll answer those. So so let's go. Let's get to Lorenzo and talk about the evolution of a product and a process that they have started and worked through, and I think very interesting. So pay close attention, as always, to Lorenzo.
All right. I'm just trying to. Okay, thank you, Michael. In the interest of time, I will try. We are allocated around 15 minutes to do all this. So, if you suddenly see me without any sound, in silent mode, then you would have known that Michael has sought to take revenge and muted me. Anyhow, I thought I'd title my portion "Tech in Touch." I think a lot of the microinsurance that's being done all over the world has had face-to-face approach, et cetera, et cetera. Others do it through the mobile and MNOs, et cetera, which I'm sure my fellow speakers will cover. But insofar as we were concerned, we thought that touch, which was so important in getting people to get into micro, could benefit from the advancements in technology. And so I call it this tech in touch rather than versus touch, a balancing act. Okay. Now, initial pain points. I'd like to tell this like a story, and this is really quite simplified. And so today I share with you some pain, some pain that we feel. I think way back, we started our micro business in 2008, 2009. But by then, we built up a decent portfolio in 2014, thereabouts. So we were looking at, through one particular account, we were looking at around about 500,000 in enrollments a year. But then we were struggling because a lot of this was so manual. And so several months of delay in encoding client data. And we didn't quite like that. And then so we were worried about the timeliness of it. We were also worried about the accuracy of it, since a lot of this was handwritten and then encoded. And so the solution, ergo, was automated enrollment. Just as simple as that. We weren't even talking about digitization, just automated enrollment. And so, this is so let's call this the automated enrollment project. It's a brief timeline. And so it is this program, which we thought would take off and, and help us a great deal, has evolved into some sort of a saga that still runs in this year of the pandemic. And so, the early days, that's called 2014, when we began the early days. The year after, which we launched this in a relatively big way, spending about over $80,000 at the very least to purchase a lot of these units. And then a gap of 2 years where we prepared for the relaunch. And then, because it didn't work, something still didn't quite work, I termed 2019 the comeback. And this time, through a chat bot on Facebook Messenger. And then, of course, even that had its own struggles and challenges. Henceforth, we are in the year 2020, and it's now an app. Okay, so just quickly, the early days. We were toying with the idea, how do you speed up enrollment and increase accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. And back then in 2014, the issue was, a phone or a tablet. And at that time, And we weren't quite sure, and there was, things were quite expensive, and so at the end of the day, we scoped the market. We said, okay, we're going to go with a gadget that was a cross between the two, a phablet. It was bigger than a phone, but smaller than the normal tablet. So we said, yeah, clearly it should be, have a big enough screen for faster input of data and less prone to misspelling. But you can see already, one of the photos I'm showing you, part of the observations as early as then was, oh my God, my fingers are too big for this phone, it isn't quite clear, et cetera, et cetera. And so we actually ordered over 800 phablets, to the first bunch of microinsurance agents out in the field. And, so this cost about $80,000, as I was mentioning. So set up the SIM cards, the app installation. And so, ergo, the year of the launch. And so the year of the launch was quite interesting. The phablet setup was in place. We developed the app ready for distribution and use, et cetera, et cetera. We did little trainings as well. You can see the photo on the upper right hand, of these proud agents, micro agents. We call them nanais, mothers, who just finished training. But it's quite interesting, the feedback that we got. Back then, we thought, we and the people, who worked in the offices in the heart of Manila thought that, hey, smartphones are the way to go. But it wasn't that way yet in that particular low-income market in 2014 and early 2015. And so even as we were doing the training, we noticed that there were certain issues that we should have been more cautious about. Just basic stuff. We had imagined that everyone would be familiar with a mobile phone and a smartphone, and they weren't. So comments like, how come the keys are not alphabetically arranged? And a number of them were pressing too hard. And so we kept saying softly, but they were pressing very hard on the screen. And others were as innocent, questions that they wouldn't dare use it because they said, will my phablet explode if it overheats, or will it explode if I have several wrong entries? I mean, these are all innocent questions born out of lack of familiarity with what we thought everybody knew already. And so there was that. So that was the challenge that we faced. A lot of them were first-time smartphone users. And of course, who can forget the poor connectivity all over the Philippines, especially in the rural areas where a lot of these people market. And so learnings clearly add an offline function to the app that is highly necessary. And we had to regroup and do user acceptability tests, training the users to become more familiar with the unit itself, even before we talk about the app. And so, in fact, we call the program Techie Nanais, in Tagalog, so that's really techie moms. All right. And so the following year, we said, okay, we took quite some time to actually tweak it and find out what we could do better. And then so we were gearing up for the relaunch. Now, clearly, we had to introduce the offline function because a lot of them do sell out in the fields where there is no connectivity. And so we had to do one wherein it's actually auto-saved. And then once they hit a center, an office where there is internet, then it gets sent. And so we also, I think the training, as I mentioned to you, had to do with getting them familiar with handling the phablet. And so the game, we did it through a game format. We also, so a lot of familiarity with how do you tap, slide on and off, volume, etc. And the results weren't so bad. You're talking about, so more and more of the agents started to use it. We hadn't rolled it out to all of them yet. And so we had about 21,000 enrollments done in 2017, climbing to 79,000 and then 72,000 in 2019. I'll tell you a bit later why. Now, it seems promising, isn't it? We went up from 20,000 to, nearly 80,000. Yes, but no. Because you're talking about, by those years, you're talking about this particular accounting enrollments at 1 million. At that particular time, we were nearing 1 million in 2017, exceeded the 1 million mark in 2018, and nearly doubled it in 2019 at 1.8. So if you look at it in that perspective, there was still very little people. There was still not enough utilization. People still weren't using it as much as they should, as they always should. And so we got to the bottom of that as well. And so, what were our learnings? The phablet actually became outdated. it's grappling, we had waited, remember? This was planned in 2014 and then launched in 2015. So there was a good 3 years that has passed by. And with technology, a year is a lifetime. A year is a long time. 3 years is a lifetime. And so the app was no longer supported, with system upgrades. They had no updated operating systems. It just wasn't really working anymore. And, some of it was conking out. And yet we hadn't completely addressed some of the issues. So whereas the micro agents were filling up the forms by hand, they started to enter a lot of the data on it. So they were, effectively, they were saying, you're doubling my work. You want it faster so that you can, it can get enrolled and recognized faster, but it's doubling my work, because our partners on the ground wanted hard copies. Some of the buyers wanted hard copies. And then with this in mind, they were complaining. So we're not going to use this. Because it's doubling the work and it's not working out too well. So learnings clearly factor in technology updates, system upgrades, and if it's really been over 3 years, I think that gadget's probably on its way to obsolescence. So that was that. And so what happened? In 2019, we said, maybe, okay, things didn't work out, let's regroup, never say die. As our enrollments are climbing, we really need this tool to address the same issues that were still facing us back in 2014. We've managed to scrape through, with a lot of manualization and encoding, but that wasn't the solution. Because if you were to grow exponentially, what would happen to all that manual intervention? So a series of discussions on the processes with our partners, with the agents, and then we did immersion with the agents. How far did it go? How long does it take? What did they actually enter? We did journey mapping of that. We redesigned the proof of cover, because there had to be a lot of, the original design had a lot of requirements of what they had to enter. So we just simplified that. And so we decided, why not have a chatbot so they could have someone communicate with them in instances where they had to enter something. So we actually tested a prototype. And we developed a prototype which could run on Facebook Messenger, because we thought, hey, in 2019, people, even the low-income market were familiar with smartphones now. Had gotten used to smartphones and Facebook Messenger. So we thought it'd be something that would be easier, because there would be less training. They'd be more familiar with the unit already, which wasn't the case back in 2014. So we tested the prototype, we did a demo before 180 agents, got a lot of their feedback, in fact, the demo was to run for 15, 20 minutes, and it went over an hour. So we thought there was a great deal of discussion. So the agents were engaged. And so we proceeded to reduce the information fields that had been entered in the smartphones down to 3, which is just the name, the mobile number, and the birthday. The form still had to be filled up, but to complement it, we implemented optical character recognition tools, technology to actually capture it. So they would take a picture and send it via Facebook Messenger and transmit everything to us. And so we thought, woo, wonderful, genius, terrific. And so roll out later in 2019, the chatbot via Facebook Messenger to 15 select agents. We said these were people who were quite adept with the smartphone. And the enrollments were a decent, around, under 1,000 for that short period. But what happened? And in fact, one of the good comments that we got was that with Nanai, which is the chatbot, one of the agents said, it's like talking to a friend. I get someone replies to me even if I'm entering these things at 2 a.m. in the morning, not unlike now, maybe. So that was a good thing. And so we then, in October, launched the chatbot via Messenger to 500 agents, because we thought, the first 15 did well and it had good feedback. And so total transactions for that limited group, for a 12-month period, ran to about 82,000. We were still troubled because by 2019, our total enrollments for the year had hit 1.8 million for that account. And you were still looking at 82,000. And so we said, something's not quite right. So this saga has been stretched. And in truth, of course, again, the slow transmission was a big issue. But what we had failed to realize was that there were limitations to what you can actually transmit via Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger actually squashes and it alters a bit the photos that get sent on it. So the images are compressed, and when they get through, it takes a long time and isn't as clear. And so the bad quality slows down the process as well. Not to mention the fact that it makes it difficult for the OCR to now translate that into what was written. And so our learnings were, we thought, great idea, FB Messenger helped, as the agents were familiar with it, but the internet connectivity remains the biggest challenge, and Facebook Messenger as a medium, as a platform, had its limitations, especially if we were to use the OCR. So the saga continues. And here we are in the year of the pandemic. And we said, well, let's go back, regroup, and relearn from the various shortcomings that we had. And so we said, let's deal with the limitations of FB Messenger by developing an app that truly addresses those concerns. So we just said we're going to win an app, because we double checked, and with the Facebook Messenger, there was just no way we'd go around it. So we said, let's do an app in which the agents could then download it on their smartphones, and it made the uploading of photos faster and in better form. And so that addressed the issue of the slow reply from the chatbot, which was really brought upon by the internet connectivity as well. And this is where we failed to learn the lesson. We already knew we needed an offline mode. This was learned in the first example when we launched initially the phone tablet, and yet we forgot all about it when we launched our chatbot on Facebook Messenger. How could we? It's not as if the problem went away. And so again, today we've steadfastly realized that in the Philippines, up until further notice, anything that's online needs an offline mode if we want to use it as a tool for enrollment. And so this ensured better quality of the captured images and a faster upload. And so we're now in the process of testing the app. It's just about done, and we are about to begin virtual training of the micro agents. And so the virtual training will include having a demo video that gets sent to them. It also means in areas in the provinces where there's no longer any lockdown, people can congregate safely, hopefully with masks in the centers, and there could be some actual training, and that could be streamed to other people who are still in lockdown. And so, and so the intention is that we would roll this out 2 weeks from today, actually, 2 weeks from now, and that we would do post-training assessment and 2 weeks after, to monitor, tweak, etc. And so that brings me the end of my story, but not yet the saga. We shall find out later on this year. But quickly, simple lessons. Do not assume. Never assume that and that was what we did. We thought at the first time, hey, a phone tablet, genius. We never thought that was not common, that was still not rampant amongst the low income sector. And so we developed something possibly ahead of its time, but which then suffered from the user familiarity and acceptance. Prepare for offline internet connectivity, always quite bad, always quite unpredictable, and that should never be forgotten. So that is high now on our tick box. And let's all remember, technology is an enabler, at least insofar as the Philippine market is concerned. For micro, technology is still an enabler. It cannot yet fully replace that face-to-face interaction, that trust, that credibility element that's brought about by someone that they're comfortable with, but by someone they've dealt with. And so technology is a great enabler, but it is also continuously evolving. So we've got to keep evolving with technology. So something that may seem terrific 3 years ago will obviously be outdated, if not obsolete, 3 years after. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. And Michael, I'm within, I think, the timeline. Thank you.
Hey, you've got extra time. We'll save that up for the next presentation. Lorenzo, just hearing this story is exhausting to me.
Well, try going out to the field and and going through.
And I'm a little embarrassed that you were using my questions as your examples. Is my phablet going to blow up and those kinds of things? Yeah. Lorenzo, these are sure ups and downs, but also as we look at the activities up and down, this is also expenses up and down too.
Yes. As
technology changes, I mean, you're not the master of your own destiny, so to speak. You're dependent on technology and the technology evolution. You're dependent on how people are evolving with the technology, and internet connectivity. And so, it's clear that there needs to be a solution here. I mean, I guess you do put on 1.8 million people, but only getting what 80,000 is what 5% of that maybe.
That's right.
So I think So I think clearly it's needed, but all these efforts that you've made must have been super expensive.
Yes. Okay. In terms of outright expenses, Michael, it was back then in 2014. It was getting the go signal from the management team, from the board, to say that, are you okay if we invest in anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 just on the development of the phablet and the application, etc., just on that. So that took quite a bit, but I said there's no time like the present. We were going at half a million enrollments. I think we've got to do it now, because if we wait until it scales even further, then we have bigger backlogs to fill. And so we got the go signal. And so the cost, Michael, was not just outright $100,000 or $80,000. It was really the time of development, going out in the field, getting them attuned, et cetera, et cetera. And then it didn't work, for a variety of reasons. And then so you regroup, and then each time you regroup and you go back, you do iterations. And at the end of the day, when we finally thought, hey, we've probably had it, we would probably now have it, and then let's relaunch. And then you find that tool you were so proud of 3 years ago is now obsolete, conking out. Which means it's which means a lot of that would have gone to waste. And so, but then by that time, our enrollments had doubled. So the problem is still there. Now, the thing I also wanted to share is that you've got to keep going. I mean, this is just one aspect of it. I mean, we kept going. We did a lot of manual encoding, hired additional people, et cetera, because you cannot allow this to stop the other stuff, other portions of your business from running. You've still got, more clients to win over. You've still got more enrollments to book. And so it continued to climb. But it's just that for us, each time the enrollments climbed higher and increased exponentially, it made the need to resolve this issue of enrollment, of automated enrollment, more necessary, more essential. And, and it made it more timely. And that was why we shifted completely to a chatbot, and we thought, hey, Messenger's a thing. And yet even that had its limitations. So we're putting our fingers crossed that this time around that it's going to work.
And we wish you the best of luck too, so that next year when we come, you can tell us about how you enrolled 1.5 million on your chatbot new system.
We would like to say that. We would like to say that. That's correct.
You can do that with those 2 minutes that you had left over next year.
Thank you.
Okay. No, this is great, and I like the way you've taken us through the evolution so people can see this, and I think it's also important. I don't want to leave people with the thought that managing the evolution is just the money pit. I mean, there are huge benefits if you can make this work, and that'll, I would suspect, eliminate or mitigate those costs that you
Sorry, definitely, Michael. I think back then when we launched, with the phone tablet, they were not familiar with the smartphone. But by then, by 2019, late 2018, 2019, they were familiar with smartphones. Even the low-income sector, some of them had a couple of smartphones. And number two, more importantly, they were even familiar with social media and Facebook Messenger. So the acceptance, the familiarity, the lack of fear was no longer there. So it allowed us to experiment with apps and training. So even that evolved, you see. So sometimes it's a matter of timing as well, isn't it? You call it being ahead of your time, or missing out on something. So there are factors like that to look at as well. But yeah, I just thought that it was a simple thing, and yet we didn't really do very well. And yeah, in a way, I'm a bit embarrassed, but I thought that it is a story that should be shared because yeah, well, clearly, I mean, you wanted lessons learned, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I really think none of us should be embarrassed with these lessons, and I applaud everyone for stepping up and talking about this, because I think these kinds of things are the things that are so important for all of us to hear. So Lorenzo, thank you. Let me move on to mobile network insurance and the MNO type products. I met Peter Gross in Ghana. I believe it was certainly his first month. It might have even been his first week in Microinsure, in country, looking at microinsurance. And I remember thinking that, this is excellent. We have a real marketing guy here who's going to think about this in a different way, who's going to look at microinsurance from a marketing perspective, from a client-focused perspective. And it's astonishing to see after these 10 years or so, just how much Peter's been able to do. Responsible for so much innovation within Microinsure and now within AXA, but really a serious approach and lots of effort of thinking about how clients work, how clients want to respond. And so then when we look at MNOs, we look at, I remember we've heard about mobile insurance, probably every conference for the last 10 years, from its beginnings to now. And I can even remember, Richard Leftley telling us about how they're putting on 1,000 clients a minute at one of our conferences one year. And so there was this massive growth of insurance through mobile. And it seems that the industry has matured a bit. And I think Peter is maybe the perfect person to tell us about this. So Peter, if you want to start and take us through the evolution of mobile insurance and some of the key ups and downs.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thank you, Michael, for that introduction. Far too gracious as always. I'm here to talk mostly about my own mistakes and errors in perception and execution. Just as a bit of background, I've been at this for 10 years, as Michael said. I've probably been involved in 15, almost 20 projects in the mobile insurance space. The story is always a little messier than we like to talk about. And so, we thought today would be a good example or opportunity to do that. I am with the AXA Emerging Customers team now, and AXA is involved in mobile insurance. I'm not going to spend as much time talking about AXA because AXA is a relatively small player in the mobile insurance market today, even though there are a few projects going on. I'm mostly going to spend time on my experience at Microinsure, working with Richard Leftley, and also at the inception of BIMA. So I'll get into that and kind of recap a little bit of the early days, and then spend most of my time on the sort of the tough years and what we've learned out of that as an industry and where I think we might go. So let's get into it. If I can just, there we go. So looking at 10 years, the progenitor, if you will, of mobile insurance today was Trustco with Leo in Namibia. They did a free insurance program in Namibia that worked massively well, generated increasing average revenue per user, or ARPU, and reduced churn. And Tigo, the telecom in Ghana in 2010, approached Microinsure looking to do something similar. And so I was running Microinsure shop in Ghana at the time, and and dove into it. And we ended up launching a pilot in August 2010, and then a full launch in January 2011. So 10 years ago at this time, I was sort of very busy on the streets, over spreadsheets and trying to figure out how this model would work. The Tigo Ghana product was the first to sustainably scale above 1 million customers and stay there. And then Tigo expanded to Tanzania and Senegal right thereafter. The product worked very simply. You spend a certain amount of airtime in a month, and you got free life insurance for yourself and a family member, a parent, spouse, child, or sibling of your choice for the following calendar month. So for many of you who've been on these conferences for a number of years, I'm sure you're bored of hearing that formulation, but it is worth recapping for those who weren't there. Spend a little bit of airtime, get free insurance. Now, the reason this worked is because there's this prepaid multi-SIM market for telecoms in emerging markets. And so we were effectively betting that if you used Tigo and other telecoms in Ghana, that you would switch a bit of your wallet share from the other telecoms to Tigo in order to get this free insurance. And at the time, it's worth saying, this idea was kind of crazy in the insurance industry, because we as an industry thought, who would change behavior to get insurance? Insurance is kind of this thing that you must have. It's this thing that, you're responsible to get. And, we need to be kind of rational and focus on the financial risks with people. And I just think this project showed that the power of insurance is emotional, social. It's a much more exciting product, I think, than many of us in the industry have thought about. And the way I like to talk about it is that insurance is basically the most emotional product in the world, the most emotionally powerful product in the world, hidden under a stack of paper. And so our job in this project with Tigo was to kind of get it out from that stack of paper and really present, you're worried about this, here's protection from a brand you know and trust. And the outcome for those of you who've been in the industry in Ghana has been powerful. So, this project led to many others, both in the mobile space and elsewhere. And in Ghana's insurance penetration grew massively to around 30% within a few years. And this project was very much a spearhead of that to help to unlock the potential of insurance coverage in the market. So as the Tigo experience evolved, it's worth saying that Bima and Microinsure, two companies that many on this call have heard of, were working together at that point. For those 3 years, Bima and Microinsure were very much partners, driving every element of these projects forward. And then in 2012, 2013, the two companies began to separate, and both raised outside capital for expansion. Bima actually ended up raising more than $200 million, which is really impressive and something that is kind of a benchmark for the industry as we've all kind of looked at this over the last decade. And so Bima and Microinsure, though, made some different assumptions about where the market would go, and both of them got some things right and both of them got some things wrong, in my estimation. And so, I think it's worth looking at where that was and what happened. So, Bima largely came from a telecom background. Microinsure started really as a nonprofit and then became for profit in this process of doing mobile insurance. Bima began with life, with Microinsure, of course, and then moved largely toward personal accident, which was they felt a more scalable project and simpler to run across the world. Microinsure began also with life with Bima and then moved into more hospital cash earlier on to try to kind of drive client value in that way. But whether it was scalable, or not was sort of an open question. On distribution, Bima, began with and has always stuck with some form of in-person agent, either field or call center, and then they've used digital channels as well. Whereas Microinsure, we chose more of a purely digital approach to sell the product. On the partnership side, Bima brought in telecoms as investors to begin, and Microinsure had one telecom as an investor, Telenor, but most distribution for the Microinsure side was really driven by the telecom. In Bima's case, they got telecoms as investors, but really drove the distribution and the project, completely themselves. So big differences there. And on economics, Bima had a reinsurance vehicle that Microinsure didn't have. Actually, Microinsure now does have it, and as part of the larger Microinsurance company as of a few months ago. But BIMA began that process a very long time ago. And so Microinsure was more of a typical intermediary, whereas BIMA was generating value from the reinsurance side as well. So then in 2014, this was sort of the high point of the industry, if you will. BIMA and Microinsure collectively, as two companies, launched 15 countries in this year. And this was sort of, to me, the high point of enthusiasm and excitement. And this is probably, Michael, where you were hearing the 1,000 signups a minute and so forth. You know, this was a very frothy time in the industry. And so groups like Airtel, ICII, and others, Digicel, made mobile insurance a really core part of their strategy. As one example, this was the project I was involved in. I call this the arms race sort of phase of the industry. Airtel Africa launched 8 products with Microinsure across the continent in 2014 alone. And I promise you, you do not want to be a part of that if that opportunity comes to you in the future, because 8 countries in 1 year was too many. It just was. And yet at the same time, you know, if Airtel Africa comes to you and says, we want to make your project a priority across the continent, it's sort of hard to say no there. But I'm gonna share some of the insights that I took away from this opportunity. By the way, at this point, Microinsure was largely sticking with freemium insurance, like the Tigo model. BIMA had moved more to paid policies sold by agents through their call center mostly, and some field agents as well. So again, there was a split happening here where Microinsure was sticking with freemium and BIMA was moving on to purely paid for insurance. And BIMA also during this period launched mobile health services. That was in 2015. And this has really been a critical new vertical. And they were, I think, the first mover at a large scale in this process. And that's one of the durable lessons. You know, their investment in telemedicine and in health tips and health education, I think really set the tone for the rest of the industry that I do expect to be one of the lingering strategic changes to make. One example I want to bring up from this period is the sort of, so you had the Tigo experience. Now this is the Airtel sort of copy paste model, if you will. So Tigo at that point was fully run by BIMA. Microinsure had been exited. And then in 2014, Microinsure had this project with Airtel in the same market, competing with Tigo Family Care Insurance. And this was sort of the most successful Microinsure project within the Airtel family. It involved life and accident and hospital cash cover, so 3 for free was the tagline. And then it launched an upsell phase in early 2015, where you simply paid one Ghana cedi a month to double your cover. So you kind of got this free cover based on your airtime usage, and then you could pay a fixed price to double your cover, whether it was a small amount or a large amount. And there was also a family option as well to pay 3 cedis a month to double your cover and give the same coverage to someone else. So again, simplicity of products, more benefits, you know, driving visibility, driving claims. This was sort of part of the Ghanaian experience, driving insurance and mobile insurance across the market. In 2017, BIMA took this project over and now runs it with Airtel Tigo combined. So the Tigo and Airtel ended up merging, and this project is now run by them. You can see the T's and C's there on the link if you want afterward. So this project did start in 2010 and still runs today, more or less, even though it's been through a few changes. So then we had a bit of so after this sort of frothy period of enthusiasm, we had this challenging phase. 2016 to 2018, at one level you saw telecoms like MTN investing in joint ventures, which became AO for them, while some other telecoms like Airtel lost some of their interest, and I'll explain a bit about that in a minute. BIMA raised $100 million for mobile health, but by the end of this period, their country footprint had shrunk back below the 2014 levels that they had reached during all those launches. And Microinsure saw the same thing. Microinsure's flagship project during this period was with Telenor India, where, and actually, Michael, that was probably the one where we were at 1,000 signups a minute. We got to 20 million customers to sign up in 5 months, but Telenor was acquired and the product was closed down. So a lot of growth, and then just as fast the project closed back down. At the end of 2018, what we saw was, in spite of all the really high expectations for this industry, we had fewer than 20 projects that had 1 million active subscribers worldwide. And I think that very few of us expected that back in the heady days of 2013, 2014. So I want to talk about a little bit of kind of why that happened. Well, first was the seduction of scale. If you think about it, we were all thinking about mobile insurance as this massive market of hundreds of millions of customers. But really those customers, while they are who you're trying to serve, the real decision maker is the telecom. And in the end, the number of telecoms willing to make mobile insurance a sustained feature of their businesses has been very few. And as a result, the market isn't really hundreds of millions of customers. It's a dozen telecoms, or a couple of dozen telecoms. So the market is actually quite small if you think about it in that way. And as a result of that, the telecoms know the power they have, and they leverage that power as they should and as they can. And so we were all kind of looking at the hundreds of millions. We really should have been looking at the handful, really, of decision makers that could make or break this industry, which were not in the insurance industry. They were in the telecom space. The second thing is that market growth is a silent killer. And so when you do grow to market after market after market, as both BIMA and Microinsurance experienced, there's so much overhead that comes with that. There are different regulatory schemes that come with that. Staff, OpEx, there are these challenges, and we were spending so much of our time at Microinsurance managing markets, managing just the logistics of having a business to open and run, that we were less able to focus on the how to make these businesses survive with telecoms, and it really hurt us. And I think from the outside, it seems that BIMA had a similar challenge, as any company would. But there really is this seduction that you can just grow to many, many markets. And that may in itself have been part of the reason that these projects constricted between 2014 and 2018. One of my favorite things to say about telecoms is that when I first started working with them, I thought they were these large, extremely sophisticated organizations that knew, incredible detail about each customer and their behavior. What I now believe about this industry is that it's effectively, a telecom is a marketing budget with towers. It's got towers to provide connectivity to these devices, and then puts marketing budget behind that. Beyond those two features, the telecoms were not really as able to provide this rich data. And even if they were able to provide it, one of the things I found is that they weren't willing to demonstrate the success of a project. And so we found a lot of challenges in calculating business value and sustaining business cases. One telling story here is I was called to a meeting by a value-added service provider who was working with my partner, and he called kind of a backroom La Cosa Nostra meeting, of 6 or 8 of us, and said, look, we've got to get beyond these telecoms, because it doesn't matter what we pay them, they always want more. So even if there's success, then the fee is raised, in 6 months. And even if there's success there, the fee is raised again. And so it was a real challenge for us to keep that up. The fourth point on the seduction scale is that, and this is really specific to my experience, digital only really failed. I think BIMA demonstrated that they were always right here, that the agent is a critical element of the chain. It can be call center, doesn't have to be in the field, but selling only via digital is very difficult to create the initial uptake and sustain the client over time. And so this is a big learning for me, and I hope for all of us. The second issue is that there are too many mouths to feed. There was this classic marriage book about 15 years ago called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Well, telecoms are from Mars and insurers are from Venus. Telecoms have to think in such short-term, massive ways whereas insurers are focused more on, long-term viability, capital markets, and really thinking very differently about the market. I think that one of BIMA and Microinsurance's skills was to kind of bridge this gap and speak telecom and speak insurance. Microinsurance spoke a bit more insurance. BIMA spoke a bit more telecom. In the end, though, I think that both BIMA and Microinsure would be honest that the telecoms have been very difficult to do business with. And so the more the telecom has been in the driver's seat, the more a project has struggled. The second lesson here is that airtime is a great method of payment, and it still is, but it does take a lot of taxes. In most markets, airtime attracts a 20% tax, and so when you add that 20% tax on top of TPA fees, and everything else, there are just so many mouths to feed in the value chain that the value ending up with a client is naturally very small. And so, airtime is this wonderful tool for getting paid, especially through smart payments, like every day, even a couple times a day, if not every week or every month. But it just adds another mouth to feed at the table, and that's a challenge. The third thing is that insurers' eyes are bigger than our stomachs. Every insurer wants to be in the mobile space, in the telecom space, and yet telecoms have to do business, in really a suave way, a very simple way, a very understandable way, and so forth. And I think if we're honest, we're still not really converted as an industry to that way of doing business. We still do think of customer centricity as a bit of a challenge. The more money the customer makes, the less money I make as an insurer. And so, although we all have wanted to be in the mobile space, our willingness to put capital at risk, to invest, to go into the red before going into the black, to try flexible products, has really been limited. I remember when we launched Hospital Cash, it was a real challenge to get insurers to underwrite that in the early days. And I was so glad that Lisa Morgan had the session yesterday talking about Hospital Cash being a big part of the industry now. I'm glad to see that that's changed. Finally, in terms of the too many mouths to feed, client value has been a real problem in this industry. If you think of claims as kind of the cost of goods, if you will, claims rates for too many of these projects have stayed between 5 and 10%. And in my experience of other industries, very few industries can sustain success at a cost of goods of 5 or 10%. There's got to be more client value there. And I do think the industry is figuring that out, but that was certainly a challenge in these projects as they fell apart. Moving on quickly, big expenses, small revenues. The average sales cycle of growing an M&O proposition is about 18 months, if not a little bit more, whereas the average product duration is less than that. Is less than 24 months, and often less than 18. That's going to be a challenge no matter how you look at it. Payment persistence has been an issue for everyone in this industry. So you get a customer sold, but do they stick with you? And do they keep paying? It's a challenge. And then finally, regulatory inconsistency leads to inefficiency. Nigeria and Ghana, for example, treat mobile insurance very, very differently. And so that creates challenges for anyone trying to work in multiple markets. Getting on to one case study before I conclude, Airtel Zambia was sort of my biggest failure, if you will, in the industry. We launched 8 weeks after we had the first pitch meeting with the telecom, so it was like the fastest launch we'd ever had, which we felt great about. They wanted to give automatic life cover to all 4 million subscribers. We increased penetration in Zambia from 1% to 16% overnight, but it collapsed in less than 18 months. So this was a big kind of stain, if you will, on our experience. When I look back at what killed the project, I should have been worried that Airtel wanted to launch so fast. They wanted to launch so fast for competitive pressures. They had a competitor that they thought was launching insurance, and so they wanted to beat them to the punch and make something big. But immediately when we sent them that first invoice for insurance for 4 million users, there was a little bit of pushback, and that never let up. Third, frequent management turnover challenged the various pivots that we tried to make. We had 4 different project leaders within Airtel on this project, and that's going to be a challenge no matter how you look at it. In the end, they simply lost appetite to grow from free to paid insurance, and the project fell apart. So this had a lot of consequences. I know there's a lot of people in our industry that look at this as a reason that mobile insurance really shouldn't be allowed. I have a different view, and I think that these projects are good to learn from, but I don't think that this demonstrates that mobile insurance is not very valuable for our industry, and I'll explain a bit more about that as I close up. Now that we come into 2020, there's an emerging consensus, which is not to put the telecom in the driver's seat. I think distribution via call center, which BIMA pioneered, is really taking over and shown to be the most successful way forward. Product value is growing. And finally, freemium is down, but not out. And I'll go into that a little bit. What we got right, I think, in mobile insurance, one is that insurance is an exciting product for emerging customers. And this is something I still think we as an industry need to learn more about and believe in more, that when you face risk on such a persistent basis, when a brand you know and trust offers you protection from those risks, you get very excited about it. That is something I think that we as AXA are trying to bring in and kind of spread out through lots of channels, not just mobile, but the rest of the industry, I think, could do the same. The more important point, though, is that mobile forces insurance to be suave. So we've talked about suave insurance for more than a decade. The mobile channel is the most effective I've ever seen in making us stick to that commitment, because it has to be fast, it has to be simple, it has to be very, very, very understandable. And I'm grateful for the mobile insurance industry having sort of impressed upon us and forced us to be what we kind of always said we wanted to be, but never quite had the stomach for. Mobile insurance can change a market like Ghana. Ghana's results have not been replicated in many other markets, but I do think that it stands out as a use case for many other markets to follow, both in terms of commercial distribution and in terms of regulation. Fourth is that digital can do some of the work, but all channels must be activated. And so mobile insurers were very excited about digital, and digital can do a lot, but you've got to really be more than just kind of one SMS at a time. You've got to activate all digital channels, and you've got to complement that with human touch. So I'll just close up with a couple of things a couple of forecasts about what I think success will look like in 2025. So first, I do think telecoms will become more passive. It's already happening, where a telecom in emerging markets is becoming more like a telecom in a developed market, where it's basically just kind of a pipe, and the brand is less powerful, and the products are more commoditized, and it's more down to third-party value-added service providers to sell themselves to push retention, and the telecom is more passive. We're seeing a sharp global growth this year in digital payments due to COVID, and so all forms of payment, whether mobile wallet, airtime or otherwise, I think all those forms of payment will continue to grow and be applied through the telecom space, and that will help mobile insurance in general. What you see across the industry is a heavier reliance on physical distribution. Before I joined AXA, I started a microinsurance company called Taraco, which is in East Africa. And Taraco really has come to market directly with these call center models and just raised a Series A round actually last week. So I'm sure there'll be news coming out about that soon. But Taraco really believes in this physical distribution model, and that's largely because of BIMA having proven that it's required for growth. So you've got to have a call center to push this product and to promote it, and maybe even field agents as well to further demonstrate the reality of the product in the market. Third is that freemium will continue, in my view, to lower customer acquisition cost, but insurers can't be greedy. So there's too many freemium insurance models in the M&O space where telecom's been paying and seeing a benefit in average revenue and churn, but the insurer is not seeing claims as they expected and won't allow a reduction in premium. That's a big mistake in my view, because freemium does provide this powerful base from which to then sell paid insurance. One of the ways to bridge this gap could be with bundling. AXA launched a project in India with Airtel that has more than 1 million customers now, where insurance is a prominent part of the airtime pack that you buy on a card. So it's bundled in the price that you pay, but it is a very visible part of what you pay for in that airtime pack. Insurers will be forced to be more agile moving forward. That's not going to change. We see companies like Zong'an launching hundreds of products a month. The rest of us are going to be pulled there no matter what we think. Value-added services, especially health, will continue to grow. So again, BIMA showed the way here. Microinsurance does it as well. AXA is doing this. And so there's a big trend toward value-added services in health from BIMA's pioneering position. And finally, I think that insurers are going to get used to mobile being more important to their brand than to gross written premium. It is a powerful way to get your brand out to the nation, but mobile insurance is not going to drive as much GWP as a lot of other lines of business. I think in the end, the real takeaway is lower, slower, but more sustainable growth. So I don't think we'll see people running out to 10 million clients as much anymore. But I do think in 5 years that mobile insurance will have grown from where it is, and it will have grown more sustainably with fewer projects dropped and more projects kind of growing, but in a slower way. So I'll pause there, Michael, and submit myself to your cross-examination.
Oh, thank you very much, Peter. I think that was really helpful to take this walk through. I loved your slide number 10 that looked at what happened and the key pieces. I mean, seduction of scale. I mean, I think we've all fallen into that trap. Too many mouths to feed. There's a couple questions on the Q&A now about how everybody seemed to be greedy, the insurers, the telcos, just as you said, and the wonder if that has maybe toned down a little bit. I remember the 60 to 70% commission expectations that they had in Nigeria, for example, just completely outrageous. So, the wonder if on the one hand, this greediness is coming down to rationality, and a kind of further question, thinking about if the telcos are really just becoming transaction vehicles, just like for payment to premiums, disbursement of claims, but just like paying your electricity bill, for example. Is that where we're going, or is there more of a role here?
Yeah, I'll answer that first, and then get back to the greed question. So I do think you're right that telecoms are becoming more of just a kind of a pipe, like a utility, where they will, have a customer base and customer lists. They'll try to monetize those lists. They'll try to take some transaction fees, but they won't be commanding these, 20, 30, 40, 50% commissions that they did in the early days. I don't know that if they did that as much as greed, Michael, as much as to build a war chest for the coming destruction, which is what becoming a pipe feels like if you're a telecom, if you're becoming more commoditized, and they saw where developed market telecoms were already going, they thought, we've got to build up as much cash and as much power as we can. I think the telecom business is a tough business. So I don't know if it's as much about greed as it is about just fear and the need to control. On the insurance side, I think we have more blame there because we are so used to loadings that in this case were unnecessary, to contingencies that are immaterial when you're talking about millions of clients on a short-term policy with small sums assured. You don't need, IBNR reserves of 20%, when you're doing that. So I think that we bear a lot of responsibility, but really it's taken two to tango. And I think that both insurers and telecoms have been responsible for the challenges seen overall.
Michael?
Thank you so much. Yeah, Lorenzo? Certainly.
I have a question for Peter. Peter, do you see, apart from the telcos being a platform for collection or an avenue for distribution, do you see any telcos really committed to help to partner with the insurers to further the cause of getting in protection to more people?
So I do see that, Lorenzo. The problem is that they're going to change tomorrow, right? That's the big challenge. You get someone very excited today. I'll never forget the CEO of Airtel Africa made, our product, my product, I was so proud, the #2 priority product in 2014. A year later, it was like, sorry, who are you? And so the change is just so rapid in their industry that excitement today doesn't mean excitement tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Hopefully we can sustain all that excitement after 25 years of microinsurance now. And I think, looking at lessons, looking at the evolutions are helpful in getting us to do that. Let's turn now to an area where I think it's hard for anybody to have any greed in terms of agriculture insurance, index insurance. Agrotosh, can you talk to us a little bit about what's been going on in this agriculture and index area? There's been a lot of talk. We've had a number of sessions. We've heard Michael Carter tell us about assessing the value of these products. Can you take us through a little bit of the story here, Agrotosh?
Yeah, sure. I hope you can see the slide as well.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so I'll keep the session, well, I'll try to stick to the 15 minutes. And so, yeah, I mean, so basically, I just want to talk through some of the many challenges which I've come across over the years. So as a way of quick introduction, I'm basically the managing director of Risk Shield. We are a small consultancy firm and service provider based out of Zambia. So I'm in Lusaka currently in Zambia. And but we've been working in a number of countries over the last 5.5 years now that we've been around. So it's been over 30 countries now, and mostly in Africa, but also quite a bit of work in Asia and Australasia as well recently, and some work in Europe as well. So now to go to your, to really focus on the challenges for the rest of this session and some of the ways we've dealt with these challenges and even how they came about in the first place, as well as some ideas on how these challenges could be addressed by, or, could be even thought about by the people attending this session. So if I start off with looking at perhaps some of the most more known challenges, which is to do with the product in terms of the data that's being used for the products, if it is an index product or even an indemnity product, what's the underlying data and so on. So in general, one of the challenges I've seen over the years is there's not really a consensus of, firstly, say even basic questions like if you want to start off an agriculture insurance product for small scale farmers in a country where it's never been done before, there's no experience previously. Where do you start? And are there any superior or inferior products? Yeah, I know there's sometimes quite a bit of heated debate goes on between partisan lines between weather index and yield index and so on. And it's good to have those debates. But overall, there's not really a scientific analysis and consensus about, firstly, what types of products are more suitable where, right? And even if within the particular category, so let's see, if you look at weather index for a start, what kind of parameters do you use? Do you start with rainfall? Do you look at soil moisture? Do you look at evapotranspiration? Different companies, different insurers, reinsurers have different views, but there's not really overall scientific consensus on this matter. And that's not necessarily the problem, but where it is a problem is, where I think especially in those cases where, let's say, a local insurance company in sub-Saharan Africa wants to start off with a product for small-scale farmers, they don't really know where to start. So sometimes we see people are using, policy documents which have been developed literally a decade ago. Yeah, there were some products developed based on weather stations back in 2011 or so, which I still see being circulated around, and people have not really been, they're not sure how does this product compare to a satellite-based product or a yield product and so on. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges we see. Similarly, again, a little bit more on the data side, and I think if you're interested in data, then I guess this point would be more interesting for you. Overall, what we see is, again, from an actuarial perspective, and indeed from any perspective, it's very difficult to access data points. And sometimes these data points I'm talking about are things which you would have thought that, in this day and age should be available. So there should be GPS coordinates, not of individual farmers, but at least of reference points. So at least you should know where is this village, right? But this is actually a very big challenge we come across on a practical day-to-day basis, that it's very difficult to access data points. Apart from, things like GPS coordinates or agriculture data and so on, even accessing data that's actually there and should be logically publicly available is not always the case. So I think good example of this is what I came across in Zambia before I moved here 6-7 years ago, where we were having a meeting with the meteorological department, and we were asking them for their the weather data that the Met department has in Zambia, and then they couldn't give it to us because their floppy disks weren't working. So this wasn't that long ago. This was about 7 years ago. But so you can imagine, I mean, just as an example, the state at which a lot of the data is available, or the lack of access to the data, is a major problem. Apart from the technological side of it, there's a big financial aspect that comes up. So in some countries, remember we did some work in Mozambique, where we were trying to access the data. And in general, the data should actually be available for free. But I think the moment the meteorological department understood that, okay, there's an insurance company involved here, although there were no products launched or there's no premiums paid, but there was an expectation of commercial gains. So then I think they invoiced or they put a cost of about $50,000 to access the historical data, which obviously the insurer or reinsurer wouldn't even consider. So, and those are some of the challenges we come across when in terms of accessing data points or the essential data that you actually need. And this becomes a very big challenge when it comes to the overall product quality, and of course, to a very big hot topic in index insurance particularly, which is also relevant for indemnity insurance, I think. But sticking to index, basis risk. So basis risk becomes a big issue, of course, with any kind of index insurance products. I think we're all more or less familiar about the issues you have with weather index insurance in terms of basis risk. What we may not be that familiar about, though, is yield index as well actually has a lot of basis risk issues. So currently we're dealing with a client in East Africa where they've had severe basis risk issues over the last 5-6 years to do with yield index. And I think that's the nature of the index insurance products, because at the end of the day, you're not insuring individual farmers, you're insuring on the basis of an index. And so it really comes down to how that index is structured and priced, what data is being used. And so there could be many reasons why basis risk will be there. Yeah. So there are some ways of addressing basis risk, which I mean, will take up a few hours on its own. But I mean, broadly speaking, in general, I think with all of these challenges, the way we try to deal with these product-related challenges is to look at different sources of data, doing ground truthing as much as is possible, although there are some practical challenges there as well. But in general, it's really important to validate the different products which are being built. So I think in many countries around the world, in Africa, in Asia, elsewhere, a lot of products are being developed and launched without sufficient validation, which actually leads to an exacerbation of these challenges as well. So then looking at some of the other issues as well, and there's going to be a long checklist of problems, but maybe a few ideas of how we could address these as well. There is, I think this issue is actually a very big one, which we see that if you look at the nature of a lot of the risks we're trying to cover here, yeah, so say the severe droughts that take place in sub-Saharan Africa, or the floods in Southeast Asia, by the very nature of their risks and their frequencies, you would end up with a very expensive product. You can easily have products north of 10% in terms of premium, right? But then if you look at the rationally, what would farmers be prepared to pay? What would distribution channels be able to price within their loans and inputs without it becoming exorbitant or without it causing regulatory problems? It's much, much less than what the actuarial or the risk rates are. Yeah. So you end up in a situation, I think Nigeria is a good example of this, I think you've also come across this, Michael, where we see that, it's such a price sensitive market for various reasons. So they've been used to having products at 2% from the government insurer previously. And that's not even talking about the subsidy, that's another issue. But even before we get to the subsidy, because the premium caps are so tight, you end up in a situation where if you want to have a product that's going to be viable going forward, you'll have to be really imaginative about how it can be done. So again, there are different ways we try to address this issue. It's to do with maybe the structuring of the product, or it's to do with the nature of the product that's insured, even the sum insured value. There are a number of ways, but at the end of the day, it's also important to explain to the farmers eventually, and in the short term, even the aggregators. Yeah, so these are like the agribusinesses or the banks, the MFIs through which you're reaching the farmers, the farmer organizations. it's important to explain to them the difference between a 2% product and an 8% product. Because in their minds, they see, and this is in the case of commercial banks as well, they see an 8% product and they think this is the insurer wanting to rip us off, right? They don't understand this whole concept of risk-based pricing, which I think us in the insurance industry and as actuaries, we're very familiar with. It's a very alien concept for most people. Then a few other issues we see on the product-related side is to do with, on the implementation side rather, it's to do with lack of skilled loss assessors. Because I think with agriculture insurance, the discourse in the last few years has also extended beyond just index or weather index. We're seeing a lot of hybrid products. We're seeing MPCI products or named indemnity products doing quite well in some countries. So I think it's beyond just the typical index products that we were talking about years ago. But at the same time, even with these indemnity products, so recently we supported an insurer in launching a hybrid product in Nigeria, which has a component of indemnity and which was much appreciated by the market. But there's a lot of practical challenges. Who's going to go out and actually assess these claims? And of course, there are people, but then there needs to be a process. There needs to be a standardization. So I was in Maputo some months ago before COVID, and there were a bunch of loss assessors there who had come from Harare to do loss assessments of tobacco fields in Mozambique. So imagine the cost of someone flying to Maputo for doing loss assessments. But that's the reality, because there's literally no one in Mozambique who the insurers trust, more importantly, even the farmers trust to actually assess their fields. So those are some of the implementation challenges. Number 6 is one of my personal rants there in a way, but it's kind of a genuine concern as well, that essentially with a lot of the product development that we have to do, I mean, if it is not just from the perspective of a project, but if it is on a commercial scale, or you're getting requests from insurance companies and so on, we sometimes get requests really late in the season. Yeah, and so this is like the season starting tomorrow. We're getting the data in today, literally, things like that. And this is not to do with the insurance companies not understanding or anything else like that. It's the nature of the market as well, because remember, in order to reach small-scale farmers, you have to go through aggregators, and very efficient ones. But these aggregators, they are usually, they are among the most difficult businesses you'll come across anywhere in the world, because they are, working in Asia, in Africa, in very uncertain markets. One year they're working, the next year they're not. All sorts of things are happening. So from the aggregators' perspective as well, they don't really know if it's a contract farming company. Let's say if I take the example of Zambia this year, a lot of companies don't even know now, although the rains have virtually started, they don't even know now, are they going to actually give inputs, in which areas, will it be on credit, or will they just sell the inputs? They don't even know that, all of those variables now. So that becomes a challenge in terms of having products which are in sync with what the aggregators need. But of course, there are ways of dealing with all of these issues. I think number 6 is something which can be prepared for, and basically products can be developed in advance, and so there can be a process. And at the same time, there can also be cutoff dates. I think this is another issue we've seen, where often insurers don't apply cutoff dates because they're also keen to get the business in time for the season. Moving on to a few other challenges, I'll just talk about them together, maybe in the interest of time. I think number 7 is one of the paradoxical problems that no one's really talked about much, but it's very relevant, which is we're expecting farmers to, if farmers were actually, willing and, expected to pay the premiums themselves, yeah, we're asking them to pay the premiums at the worst time of the year for themselves, right? Because we're asking them when, at the start of the season. Obviously, it makes sense from the general insurance perspective, but not from the farmer's perspective, because that's the worst time of the year for them to lose 10 cents, yeah? Like this is in the case of small-scale farmers in Africa or Asia. So they would be really unwilling to pay any premium, even if they love the product, they really see value in it, they've had claims before, they would like to buy it again. They would be very unwilling to buy it, paying their own cash just before the rains start. Yeah, and this is something which I think has hardly ever been addressed, or it's not been addressed much. Of course, we are aware of this problem for years, so we've been looking at ways around it. One of the ways around this has been, of course, premium subsidies play a role here. But apart from premium subsidies, premium pre-financing as well. So we've had cases where contract farming companies, for example, in Southern Africa, they offer these products on a voluntary basis. It's not bundled in or mandatory, but on a voluntary basis in some cases. And they offer the product, but they finance the premium on the farmer's behalf. So if in some years we've seen when the premiums are being financed, we have a 60–70% take up, which is pretty impressive, and it's quite high. I think with another general challenge I would say I've seen in the sector, and this could be a little bit controversial maybe, but I have seen that, you know, of course the insurers, but even the reinsurers are generally very averse to trying out new things. Yeah. So I know with the, for example, there was a yield index product we've been doing for three seasons now, and it's been immensely profitable for the local insurance companies. It's a claims ratio of about 30% and premiums of over $1 million already. But in the first season, we literally had to beg every reinsurer in the market to take it on. Although we were fairly convinced about it would work out, just because it was because of the the way they look at the sector. So I guess this is also more relevant for some of the major international reinsurers. I don't think they take on as much risk or also look at as much innovation as they could actually, given their position and their huge balance sheets. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Agrotosh, it's I'm getting more and more depressed. There's so many challenges that aren't being particularly well.
Okay.
And yet there's so much promise, I think, for agriculture insurance and index insurance. It's almost feeling like that death by 1,000 cuts. There's this thing and that thing and this thing. Is there some new methodology that addresses these and the others? I know you've got a list of challenges for supply and distribution and public sector. Is there something that's kind of looking at all this? You mentioned some of them we've known for a while. Are there things that we're starting to see now that are kind of pushing these aside with better solutions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. In fact, let me just maybe address some of the other points in the same vein, that, looking at some of the ways that we've, there have been solutions to these challenges. Yeah, so I think the objective is not to depress everyone at the end of the conference, but to really, to be very open about, look, these are the challenges. They're not failures per se, or they're not, roadblocks, but we need to be aware of them. And so, I mean, there are, one issue is around, the awareness of the insurance cover as well, which is one of the big challenges we've seen. But there again, we've seen that, one of the, I think, again, interesting developments in the last few years has been the rise of essentially the rise of meso-level agricultural insurance. So we've seen quite a few cases where, let's say, a bank or an MFI or an agribusiness would take out similar products with some, of course, some changes in the structure, but otherwise similar products to for their own risk management and also for achieving loyalty with the farmers, for example, using it as a kind of incentive to increase the farming production. And we have seen some, we have actually seen this make more sense because, so for example, when it comes to the awareness of insurance cover, we've seen that if you actually have insurance bundled with a full value chain, as it were, or essentially with the inputs, you also have an off-taker in mind, then it all makes sense to the farmers. So obviously on its own, the insurance product is very abstract and is not that interesting. But if it comes bundled with inputs, and then there's also a company which is available to buy their crops, which is what the farmers really care about at the end of the day, then that can certainly help. So I think, although we should be aware of, there is some potential conflicts of interest between the interests of farmers and the interests of aggregators, which is also very relevant. But at the same time, there's obviously very many synergies in addressing the risks, and challenges which are relevant for aggregators, which would also be, which as a result, they would actually be interested in continuing these products. And we have seen cases of some agribusinesses who have continued these products over the last 7-8 years now, which is, continuously, which is fairly good sort of testimony that they must be seeing some value in them. And as a result, farmers have also been accessing the insurance products on a voluntary basis through these aggregators. But at the same time, yeah, so we've also seen issues of lack of continuity with aggregators, simply to do with, I think, similar to some of the issues that Peter was talking about on his session on mobile. We've seen similar issues as well with seed companies, for example, that, if a seed company doesn't see the expected increase in sales as they were expecting, forget the next season. Even that season, they might not pay the premium because they were using from their perspective, they were just using it as a sales promotion. Yeah. And then a few other issues. We have seen issues of adverse selection. We have seen issues of claims not always reaching the farmers as well. But then at the same time, overall, I mean, maybe to look, have a more positive spin on it, but also to look at it, in terms of the adverse selection issue. Generally, I would say adverse selection has not been so much of an issue globally. Yeah. So there are cases, remember in Thailand some years ago, you had farmers taking up products on a voluntary basis and 700% claims ratios there, but because they were being sold really late in the season. But those are more of anomalies. So I think overall, if you look at the kind of, claims ratios in Thailand, it's about 60-70% in the national scheme. So I think the adverse selection issue has been there, but it's not such a major one. I think
I need you to.
All right.
I'm sorry. I'm
Sure.
sorry. I need you to wrap up. I know I've been a bit unfair.
No problem.
Sorry about that. I do have a presentation I have to do next week. You can do that in place of me if you want that time too.
No, that's fine. So that's fine. I think just to wrap up with the last comments here, I think it's really important to look at the roles of the public sector as well. And I know there's quite a few challenges, obviously, on the public sector side. But at the same time, I think what's interesting to see is in a number of countries, we're seeing, obviously, of countries like India, China, others where have huge public sector agriculture insurance schemes. But in a number of other countries as well, we're seeing governments, starting these schemes and starting them quite very methodically. So starting them, not just thinking about subsidies, but thinking about the roles they can play with claims assessment, with provision of data, with regulations, with accountability of aggregators. So I think on the public sector side, overall, actually, I think that it's quite promising on the public sector side. But again, obviously, there are challenges around how these schemes are done at the national level as well. Yeah. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah. Thanks, Agrotosh. And again, I'm sorry for cutting you short. But there have been many challenges here, and I think in many ways this might be about the most difficult area that we've embarked on in microinsurance, agriculture and index insurance. I know there are some new and interesting things. The MISO approach, I think, is going to be very helpful as long as we can make sure that clients actually get some benefit from that. We've heard of some new things from like Global Parametrics, who are now paying in advance of the event based on index products or indices. So there are some new things that are happening trying to address some of these issues, but it's important that that we recognize that, and certainly the list of challenges is daunting, but being addressed piece by piece. So thank you. We got a bunch of questions and just a couple minutes more. I think actually what I'd like to do is just do a bit of a closing statement for everyone. We're going to do something a little differently than the other sessions. What we're going to do is, after we have a formal closing, Dirk will do that, but after we have a formal closing, we'll try to stick around, and those people who want to stay should raise their hands, and then the Min will unlock their ability to speak and be seen. And then we'll try to have a little bit of a discussion after that. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but in the spirit of innovation and evolution, let's give it a try. So for now, maybe we could have a quick conclusion and kind of, what do we do here? We've learned all these things. Now it's time to go to the next step. We've done product development for years and years, and the diagram I use is always and that's clearly what I'm hearing from all of you, is that we learn and we try to do better, and we learn some more and we try to do better and we learn some more. And I think generally we're all getting better, whether it's agriculture or MNOs or technology focused activities. I think we're getting better, and we'll continue to get better, and we should. Stopping, not taking advantage of the lessons is a mistake for all of us. And so maybe just a quick 30 seconds, Peter, and then Lorenzo, and then Agrotosh. And I won't cut you off, Agrotosh. You'll have your real 30 seconds. Sorry. Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I think that, as you say, the industry needs to embrace innovation and continue to embrace innovation. Testing, failing, learning, trying again are not yet at the heart of what it means to launch a new initiative in our industry. And the more that we can accept that fact of any new project, new product, new market, the better for the industry overall.
Yeah, definitely. Lorenzo? Can't hear you. I'm sure there's great wisdom coming out of your mouth, but.
Okay. No, I was muted. Anyway, I think there's a lot of learnings to be made from successful stories and success stories all over the world, but they're equally important lessons to grasp from the failures and what did not go well. And so we talk a lot, and for us, I think an avenue like this, which allows us to share where we did not go, where we went wrong, did not do so well, is useful if it helps other people. If it eases their pain, if it cuts the learning process for them and speeds up the catch up, I think that would be important. I think ultimately the let's not forget the intention, which is to get proper protection, affordable protection to as many people as possible.
Yes, yes. Agrotosh, you get the last word.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, no, I think it's really important to kind of learn from the different failures. I mean, the failures are actually more revealing than the successes. And what's also interesting, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned in different parts of the world, which sometimes stays in those parts of the world. So it's quite important to actually learn lessons from other parts of the world as well, which it could be quite applicable. I know there's quite a few things that countries in Asia have actually learned from the way index insurance is done in Africa, which is actually influencing the nature of those products. Yeah.
Excellent. So Peter, Agrotosh, Lorenzo, thank you so much for providing us this wisdom. And for now, we'll end the formal section of our session. Actually, Dirk does that because he's the man of the conference. But while Dirk is speaking, those of you who want to stay on and talk a little bit about some of these questions you've got and some of the thoughts you might have, feel free to raise your hands. And then after Dirk is done, then we'll go into an informal session. So thank you all, and thank you, Dirk.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you to the panelists. One of the learnings for me was that we should probably have a failure session followed by a success session, because we were hearing a lot about lessons learned. But I know that within the three people that we're speaking now, there are lots of successes, and we could have another session on that. So just use a bit of your time to discuss and continue the discussions, but do not forget to tune in for the last session.
Can't hear you, Dirk.
Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
So stay on for a little bit of discussions and tune into the session that starts at 2 p.m. and where we will have, for example, Denis Duverne, the chairman of the IDF, and he will also share some success stories, why he came into inclusive insurance. We have the chairman of the Association of Insurers and Reinsurance in Developing Countries. We have Jan Gallet from UNDP and Dubel Chamberlain from the Microinsurance Network, and certainly Catherine will wrap up the conference. So thank you to Michael, thanks to all the panelists for getting up early, staying up early. I think it was really worth it, and see you in a few minutes.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Thank you. And yeah, it sounds like a great lineup in this next session.